Hey, Mike, what do Kelly Slater and PT have in common?
I don't know. They're both world champs?
Nope, they both own Endless Summer box set.
Oh my God, rad. You guys, you can get it too. The link's in the show notes.
On a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Quivercast, where we chat with surfers from all around the world, from all walks of life, and we get their story. Find us at www.thequivercast.com. I am Mike, your host. Let's get into the show. Hey everybody, Richie Lovett's here, and I'm stoked. Hey, Richie, how you doing?
I'm doing really good, Mike. Big thanks for having me on the show, mate.
No, I'm stoked. Actually, really stoked. You know, I like your commentating on the WSL. That's where, like, the...
Yeah, it's been really cool tapping into that. And, you know, I've obviously got a long history with the WSL.
Yep.
You know, competing on the tour for all those years, and I'm such a surf nerd. You know, I love professional surfing. I love all forms of surfing, actually. But to tap back into it and, you know, try and bring something to the webcast for the WSL, more from I guess, an analyst and an analytical brain, from someone who's just a real connoisseur of good surfing. I enjoy being in the chair. There's a really good crew that are involved in the webcast, and yeah, it's like I said, pro surfing. I'm a huge fan.
How'd you get the call up on that? Did you have to apply, or did they come to you?
You know, it was a little bit of both. I dabbled in it regionally. Like every time the Australian Open came around at my local beach down at Manly, I used to jump in the chair. Ronnie Blakey, he's one of my best friends. So
yeah.
He was always kind of getting me to come into the booth and doing little guest appearances here and there. And then I started doing the championship tour events over in California. So obviously Lowers is a pretty special place for me.
Yes.
You know, I've had lots of good memories there. And then the Hurley event used to be on there every year. And I was connected with Hurley at the time. And those guys were like, come on over and jump in the booth with us. So that's sort of where it started. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I went down to Bell's and I just caught up with the head of production for the WSL and just said, hey, look, I'm keen to jump in where you guys need me. And then I think they gave me a crack during the COVID year. They put me on for the 4 CTs that we had here in Australia. And then after that, it's kind of been a call-up thing. So I let them know which ones I want to do, and they say yay or nay. And thankfully, I've been able to get a start on some really cool events. And, you know, it's good because it complements my other stuff that I do on a daily basis.
So you have a family too, right? You have the kids?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I got 2 kids. My oldest boy, 14, Lenny, is...
Okay.
I just dropped him at school, and my daughter Mabel, she's 11.
Okay.
Yeah, they're both at school, so Dad can do some work now.
But are they stoked to see your dad on TV?
Yeah, you know, they do. They're stoked. They're proud. They obviously know the career that I had, and
yeah,
they're pretty buzzed the fact that I'm still involved. And you know, I can be away somewhere, and they can turn on the TV and watch the broadcast, and they can hear Dad or see Dad there. And my daughter in particular, you know, she wants to follow in Dad's footsteps in terms of a pro career and a commentary career.
Really?
Yeah. She's already saying, you know, Dad, I want to be a pro surfer and do commentary. So that's cool. That's a proud dad moment. But my son, not so much. He's like into basketball and soccer and riding bikes and jumping off things and into water or whatever. He does love surfing, but he definitely didn't get the hook like I did. I knew pretty early on what I wanted to do.
Let's go way back. How'd you get into surfing?
It was my grandfather.
Really?
Yeah. My grandfather used to live. I used to live in a suburb about half an hour away from the beach, and my grandfather used to live on the hill just above the surf, right at Manly Beach, which is one of the famous beaches in Sydney. And my brother and I used to go down and stay with my grandparents, and he had a couple of old surfboards, and he used to take us down. And I remember the first wave, really. I remember the first time he sort of put me on a board and paddled me out the back and pushed me onto this little wave. And just the memory of screaming along this little green face and the sensations in particular are the things that are etched in my mind. And from that moment on, I was like, this is something I want to be a part of. I need this in my life. From there, we just surfed more and more every spare minute. Once I got into my teens and everything, it was like, okay, how can I get to the beach? How can I spend as much time doing this thing, as I could? And we were a real ocean kind of bound family. My dad and my mom, they're into boats. My dad's been in the boat business his whole life, and my brother, he's into boats as well. So we were always, sailing and water skiing and windsurfing, doing all this stuff on the water. And so, yeah, when the surfing thing came, I deviated from all that other stuff and just went to the waves.
Did your grandfather surf?
He was a body surfer. He didn't necessarily, he wasn't a stand-up surfer. My dad wasn't a surfer either. Again, he was, into other forms of water sports. But yeah, I guess, his introduction to the ocean for me was, about the waves and teaching me how they work and, understanding what was going on there. And
wow.
Yeah, from that moment, I was definitely addicted.
So you hanging out with Grandpa more and more? Were you trying to get to his house because the beach is there?
Yeah, absolutely. My grandmother was right into golf, and my grandfather was into the surfing thing. So,
cool. That's so
cool. It was we were destined.
Obviously, you were surfing Manly.
Yeah, Manly became a second home to me, and as soon as I could, got out of school, and once I had the sort of means to move out of home, I moved in with a buddy of mine, Justin Cook, who was, some called him like Barton's protege back in the day. His dad was actually Barton's manager many, many years ago, and
wow.
I befriended all these locals at Manly. I was seen somewhat of an outsider for a long time because you're not from here, and there was that real local mentality down there. I just grounded out, and I was like, once they saw that I was just so, I was always coming down here, and I guess started to show some sort of talent. They were like, oh yeah, this kid's all right. Let's let him into the pack. So I moved as soon as I could. I moved down to Manly, and that was shortly after I got out of school. And then I basically went straight out of school onto the junior circuit and started really pursuing the dream of being a pro surfer.
How was that? How was the juniors?
It was good. It was tough though. It's like,
a lot of guys there.
A lot of guys there, and it's really competitive. And I feel like you're still going through this growth phase with your body, and work out what your style is going to be. And the enthusiasm's definitely there, but I guess physically and in terms of talent, there's still a lot of maturity to go. But I wasn't one of those guys that kind of dominated the junior circuit. I had little waves of doing okay, and would get a win in a comp every now and then. And then it wasn't really until I got out of the juniors, and then we had a tour in Australia called the Australian Championship Tour, and Rabbit, actually Bugs, had a hand in putting that together, and they were all sanctioned events. And that was where I really started to find my feet competitively. I ended up winning that tour.
Wow.
And then I had a good couple of years, and had a lot of success on that tour. And that kind of really gave me the belief to go on the World Qualifying Series. And then I chased that for 2 years, and it was in the second year that I qualified for the tour.
Wow. That's rad. Who were you looking out for? Like, who did you want to beat, I guess is the question. Did you have certain rivalries with anybody?
Yeah, it's funny. You develop these rivalries and friendships, right through those early stages, and Jake Patterson, who was, one of my real closest buddies on tour. We used to travel a lot together, but we met, in the junior circuit and the Australian Championship Tour. We were kind of battling it out through there. And then also, guys like Nathan Webster and then, Luke Hitchings. Those guys are a little bit younger than me, but definitely there. And there's, I think they're more friendships at that point than rivalries. You definitely want to beat them.
Yeah.
Because it's at that age that you're really starting to get these competitive urges where you just want to dominate and win everything,
Okay.
You're coming into that stage in life, a young man, and, you're really starting to try and flex your muscles a little bit. So, for me, and I guess for all surfers, that comes in the form of, competition victories, and that's when you can say you dominated everyone, and you get addicted to that feeling. So within our pack, within our crew, it was really competitive. On the northern beaches in particular, we had a really core crew from the Mark and Brett Bannister, Chris Davo was coming through, Nathan Hedge, all these guys, and then we had all these older guys that we were looking up to as well. Barton and Rob Bain and Damien Hardman, even Simon Anderson, some of the older crew. It was such a competitive hub at the time. It was probably the most competitive zone in Australia, and then things shifted up to the Gold Coast during Parko and Mick's era. So it was cool to be a part of that whole surge coming out of the northern beaches.
Yeah,
and we did it together, and we kind of bonded on it, and we all kind of graduated at the same time as well. We went through the Aussie circuit, then we all went on to the qualifying tour together, and then we all qualified together. So we kept that momentum and friendship going all the way through.
Do you think that made you a better surfer, having these guys so close?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're surfing against each other with a jersey on, but we're also surfing against each other on a day-to-day basis. I'll go up to Narrabeen and surf with Nathan, and we'd almost be just rivaling each other in the free surfs, just trying to beat each other. I saw you do this, I'm going to do something better.
Okay.
So that's healthy competition to be around. So in a way, those guys definitely sculpt who you are as a surfer and get those competitive juices flowing all day, every day.
So let's say you guys are on a road trip going up the coast or down the coast, a group of you guys. How are you guys treating each other? Are you guys kind of talking shit, or are you guys like being encouraging each other? Like, there's different ways of friendships.
Yeah, I guess our friendship was underpinned by more of a positive, environment, atmosphere where we would, encourage each other and really try and pull each other along and pull each other up rather than a lot of smack talk where we're trying to push each other down, and I guess it's almost contradictory to the way Aussies can be perceived sometimes as well. We tend to be labelled with, your friends will bring you down pretty quick, and they do. All in good fun. They'll chop you down if you're getting too hot in the clouds. But we had, I guess, because we all had this common thing that we wanted to achieve, and we wanted to share it with each other, so we were trying to pull each other along.
Oh, that's right. Eventually, you get on the CT, right?
Yep.
And how does that go?
It goes okay. It doesn't go amazingly.
Right.
I get on the tour and it's kind of weird because all of a sudden there's all these guys that you got posters of them on your wall, videos of them, and you're kind of going, hang on, I'm up against Robbie Bain, I'm up against Damien Hardman, and I'm up against Wilco. The guy's like super scary, and Potts looks like he wants to rip my head off, and it's like kind of going, how am I going to deal with this? So you've got to find your place on the tour, and it's all alphas. Everyone on that tour is an alpha male, and same on the women's side. These are all alpha women as well. They're like best of the best. They're all pumped up, and there's a confidence that you need to have to be able to succeed on the tour. And I guess for me, I did a 10-year stint on the championship tour, so that was
huge.
I'm stoked on that. But I reckon there were definitely ebbs and flows of confidence where I was like up and down, and that was probably the hardest thing for me to adjust to. I knew I surfed really well. I knew I could beat anyone. On a good day, I could beat anyone. Mm-hmm. But I guess I lacked a consistency in that confidence. That's why my results were so up and down, and I never really kind of cracked that top five, or never really challenged for a world title, but was always labelled. I think I got labelled like 4 or 5 years in a row like the most underrated surfer by all the magazines around the world, because everyone was kind of going, God, this guy surfs so good, but he's never really making the semis and finals. So what's going on? So, looking back, it's easy to analyze it now and kind of go, okay, what's wrong? The other thing, I guess, was that my time on tour also coincided with the complete domination of the pro surfing by Kelly and Andy as well. Kelly was in the throes of his peak of his kind of young career, the first half of his career, I guess. He was just so much better than everyone. And we're all kind of looking to him going, wow, that's the benchmark. How are we going to get up there, So
Yeah.
I felt like when we're on tour, we were still learning how to surf. We were still trying to get better so that we could compete against him and that whole momentum generation. And then Kelly peeled out, and then there was, the kind of Occy sunny years, and then Andy came along, and then he was dominating hard as well. So, they were great years to be on the tour, to be able to be part of that, and to surf against those guys so many times. Like I surfed against Andy a bunch and had a pretty good record against him. I surfed against Kelly even more and had the worst record against him ever.
Oh, really?
I beat the guy, not once.
Oh, really?
I beat Kelly. I came so close at the Coke Classic one year at Manly, and I had him. I was in like the 9th round or something, and I was literally winning. I surfed the best heat I could have surfed, and I had him with like 30 seconds to go, and this little wave pops up, and he needs like a 7 or a high 6 or whatever it was, and he gets this little right-hander and just goes bang, bang, bang all the way through the shore, and then this little reform happens. He does a reverse, and the crowd goes wild, and it's like, oh gosh, really? So that's the closest I ever came.
Wow. Seeing Kelly today, like you were with him years and years ago, surfing against him. Has he changed? Has this competitive nature changed?
Yeah, it definitely has. It's, watching him like closely back in those years, in his 20s and early 30s, man, the guy was just so relentless, and there was no breaking into his armor. It was like a fortress, And a lot of the time, I think his opponents were already beaten before he'd paddled out in the water because they knew how good he was everywhere he went. And you really had to be on the top of your game, have a perfect heat to be able to beat the guy, Yeah. And he knew that. He knew he was better than everyone. He knew he could beat everyone. It was almost easy for him. So, or it seemed easy for him, whereas for everyone else, it seemed like a mountain to climb to try and beat the guy.
Okay.
I watch him these days, and he's definitely softened in that competitive hunger. He's got so much more going on in his life.
Oh, yeah.
With all these businesses, and he's in a 51-year-old body now too.
Yeah.
And that comes with its challenges. So yeah, he's definitely different, but it's definitely switched on as well still, because he's still there, he still has this desire to be involved in it, and otherwise he would have stepped away ages ago. But
yeah,
to answer the question, yeah, it's softened for sure.
Okay. All right. Going back to you, did you have a certain wave or a certain type of wave that was your strength, that you knew you were a little more confident in heat?
Yeah, I was always more comfortable on my backhand.
Okay.
I loved, in saying that, I really did enjoy surfing snapper rocks up at that event. That was a really good one. The bigger wave locations were never really my strong point, although I did okay in a lot of those events.
Okay.
I had a win at Haleiwa early in my career.
Yeah.
And did really well at Sunset and made finals in Hawaii. So, I was okay in big waves, and I felt competent in big waves, but I did feel like, because I'd come from Manly, which is typical beach break style conditions,
yes,
that was probably my strength, and my backhand in particular. So, I had several wins on the qualifying tour, and most of those were on my backhand. Now that I look back on it,
okay,
I just felt like I could, even though I'm quite tall, like I'm 6 foot, I felt like I had this leverage and this vertical approach on my backhand that was a really good tool for me. I feel like I used it well. So,
and then on tour, did you hang out was it the same crew you were hanging out with, like Jake the Snake Patterson and all these guys? Are these the guys you traveled with also?
Yeah, they were. I used to hang out with Todd Prestige a lot.
Todd,
yeah, because Todd lived a couple hours down the coast, down in Gerringong. But again, we met up on the junior tour, and we did a lot of traveling together in those early years. And then when I first got on the tour, we traveled a lot together, and then Todd peeled out. That's when I sort of jumped in with Jake, and we ended up having a pretty big crew. It was myself, Jake, Hitcho, Nathan, Tommy Whitaker, and we kind of had our little crew going, and we were always traveling together and renting houses and cars together. But then there was, as I mentioned earlier, there was all these other Aussies on tour as well, Mick Lowe and Hedgie, all those guys. And, the Aussies were really doing that one big happy tour family thing before anyone. Mm-hmm. I know that, they talk about now the Brazilians are so strong and everyone's, everyone's backing each other and no one leaves the event site until, we get a winner or a loser. But the Aussies were doing that. We were doing that years and years ago, We were the first ones to, throw someone on the shoulder and cheer them up the beach, not let them touch the sand until they hit the stage, So that was, we were proud of that. And I think that's why we had a lot of years of success.
Were you guys American or Brazilian, or were you guys just proud of Australians? You understand the question?
We weren't anti anyone. Okay. I think that kind of died with Elko.
Okay.
Elko was pretty vocal about that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love what he was doing. I don't necessarily love, what he was trying to portray, but because, I'm a huge advocate of harmony and everyone showing love. But, I did love the fact that he was vocal to create these rivalries and these interests. That part about it was entertaining, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And that's Elko's personality, Yeah. And I think a lot of that kind of got squashed with that whole generation, and Bugs was part of that, and Emma and all those guys. They were portrayed as such individuals, and they were so vocal about what they did and didn't like, and Sean Thompson, all those guys were really cool. But yeah, our crew were, we used to hang out with a lot of the Americans as well,
Okay.
Shea Lopez and Diane, all those guys, Conan Hayes, we're all hanging, wherever we were going out.
Okay.
The Aussies were probably partying a little bit harder.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Have more fun.
And we were trying to have a lot of fun along the way.
Perfect.
Possibly to our detriment sometimes, but
of course, yeah.
You look back and you kind of go, would I change it? Probably not, because we did have a lot of fun.
Did you ever have too much fun where you missed the heat in the morning or something along those lines?
Yeah, got close. I never missed a heat, but I got really a couple of times, and that was, mainly on the qualifying tour.
Okay.
There wasn't so much pressure, but you're in France and it's summer and there's people everywhere and the car's happening and you're like, right up, my heat's not that early, so maybe I can stay out a little longer. And
one more. Next
minute it's 2 a.m. and you're like, man, I got to get up in 3 or 4 hours. This is kind of gnarly. So, you learn your lesson pretty quick though.
Did you change the way you surfed to get on the CT, and did things change once you were on there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense. And I think back then when I qualified a long time ago now, but it's still the same theory as today. I look at what's going on in the qualifying series, but more so the Challenger series now. Mm-hmm. And I go, gosh, these guys are surfing good, and I was firsthand, I was watching it because I was commentating at the Gold Coast and down at Narrabeen. And then I go to the championship tour events and I go, whoa, these guys are a next step up above that. It's the best way to describe it for me is that it's bigger surfing. It's the moves are bigger. There's more power and intensity in each turn. The timing's a little bit sharper. The placement of maneuvers is a little bit better. And for me, that's the biggest challenge for anyone making that transition onto the championship tour is being able to adjust that quickly and getting that sorted out. Because you think of someone like a Medina or a Toledo or Jack Robert, any of those guys, Ethan Ewing, John, their turns are done with so much impact and power. You have to match it. Otherwise, you're going to just be left in the dust. So that for me, it was the same back then. Mm-hmm. And even more so because, we were going to a lot of beach break locations and having to scrap and hustle, the 4-man heat hustle.
Yes.
Without priority at that point. So a lot of it was like, okay, get two quick waves. If you got another Aussie or another buddy in your heat, you could kind of put a bit of a Malachi crunch on the other two crew and
Were you doing that?
And block them out. Well, yeah, you had to.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Now I remember there was a heat with Hoyer that I had in Brazil, and I was really, that was the year I qualified, and I was just so keen for results, and he was just kind of cruising. He was on his kind of swan song years, and we paddled out in this heat together, and he goes, "You're getting through this heat." And I went, "Well, I'm planning on it." He goes, No, you're getting through this heat. And he was like, help me get waves and blocking guys, and it was, I don't know, it was just part of the game back then. With 4-man or 4-surfer priority these days, you can't do that. So, it's leveled out. It's more about surfing, which is good because that's what we want. Ultimately, we want the best surfers on the tour.
Did that cause problems on the sand when you guys were doing this? Later on?
No, not really, because I think it was fairly common.
Okay.
The Brazilians were known for it.
Okay.
You'd look at your heat and you'd be like, okay, I got Victor Rebus, Renan Rocha, and Armando Doltra, and you'd be like, oh damn, how am I gonna get through this? Because you knew those guys were just going to get super busy, and then just sit on you basically and stop you from catching waves. So yeah, it's a better system now, and we're the better fish because we're watching better surfing.
Okay, and everything right now is on live streaming, so we can all see, the rest of the humans can see what's going on. Back then, it wasn't like that.
No, it was interesting watching that all come about too. I remember it started with just live scores.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
Friends, family and fans and stuff, they'd be at home and they'd be refreshing the browser, waiting for it to drop in. You'd be like, oh gosh, and then sometimes you'd be ringing home already going, oh yeah, I won that one, and they're going, oh, we're still waiting for a score to drop in. So to see it go from that to then the live stream, and then the coverage these days is phenomenal. It really is unbelievable. In my opinion, anyway, I think the coverage is great.
It's good. I like it.
With all the replays and whatever, and there's always going to be something to talk about, whether it's a score or whatever it may be. For me, it's a good show. I love, if I'm not calling it and I'm not sitting in a booth, it's on either on my computer or on my TV, and I love watching it. I barely miss a heat.
Really?
Yeah. Regardless of the time zone, I'm up watching it. Even if I've got my computer in bed and I'm like trying to, resist sleep because I want to watch this heat, and I'm interested in the results. I love to watch it live.
Yeah, 100%. Are you watching Challenger Series too? Or are you strictly like watching CT?
No, I'm watching everything. I'm watching the Challenger Series. Yeah, love it.
Okay.
Just watching the US Open, just last week or whatever.
Yeah.
That was really fun, and you can't help but be involved with it because been there, done that kind of thing, and you can feel the emotion, what they're going through, and watching someone like Cole Houshman, make it. His dream became a reality already. He's already made the tour for next year.
So stoked for him.
Yeah. So cool for him, and I'd love to see Jacob Wilcox make it because he's been really close for a number of years now. It's going to be a fun tour next year, even looking at who's going to be coming on.
So some of these guys, let's say Cole, how you just said, does really well in beach breaks. He grew up in Sacramento, right? How hard is it going to be for him to transition to go to some of these bigger, heavier, gnarly waves?
From what I saw a little glimpse of it at Narrabeen at the Challenge event, and that final day when it was kind of solid. It was 6 foot, maybe 8 foot. He was surfing it like it was 2 foot.
Okay.
So he's one of those guys that I feel like if he can adjust mentally and get that confidence switched on early, that he should do well on the championship because he has the strength and he has the power.
He's a bigger kid.
He's a super good surfer, and I love all those American guys. They're so switched on, and they got a good thing going at the moment. They're all great kids, and a lot of them are going to have a long career.
You do your long stretch on the CT. At what point did you know it was time to move on, or what happened?
So for me, I kind of got kicked off the bus prematurely, and that wasn't by choice.
Yeah,
I still wanted to be on the tour, and I guess it sort of has been well documented years ago, but not so much now. But it was basically a cancer diagnosis that ended my pro career. I found out I had what's called clear cell chondrosarcoma, really rare type of bone cancer, and it was contained within the top of my femoral head in the ball joint, and they had to take it out. So they basically had to take the top third of my femur out and a bunch of muscle tissue out of my thigh and replace that whole area.
Wow.
And I've actually had it replaced again 4 or 5 years ago, just because I wore it out, the prosthetic and some of the parts, and I can still surf. I can still do the things I like to do. But yeah, it was a really weird time because I felt like I hadn't finished what I wanted to achieve. I felt like I was surfing the best I've ever surfed, to be honest with you. And I'd had the win at Lowers just a couple of years before. That was my first CT win, and I was kind of going, okay, I'm starting to get this. I feel like there's more to do, and unfortunately, I was presented with a much bigger challenge.
Yeah, that's right.
And I had to get my head around that pretty quick, and that was difficult. That was hard, and I did have a lot of support from my family, my friends, my wife at the time. She was incredible, and the whole surfing community was just unbelievable in lending support. For me, it was a huge life lesson, going from this, what is a fairly selfish existence of being a pro athlete, where everything you're thinking about is you and how you can perform and what you've got to do, to going, hey, here you go, here's a huge challenge in life, and not only do you have to get through that physically, but you got to get through it mentally. I learned a lot about myself and life along the way. I kind of look at my life in two halves. It was kind of the pro surfing half of it, and then life after pro surfing and what that's been, and they've both been amazing parts of my life. Do I wish this part of it, the middle, happened? No, absolutely not.
No,
But at the same time, this is, if you think why, I've had moments where I've gone, why did that happen? Why do all these shitty things happen to people? And I feel like you'll go crazy trying to figure it out. Sometimes you just get dealt these things, maybe because you can handle them, and maybe because you need to learn something. And it's not the first thing. I've actually had cancer twice. I've had so many other kind of challenges through life, to the tidal wave back in 94, and so many things that I've had to overcome in my life. As you get older, and you probably attest to this too, as you get older, things don't get easier. You got to manage the body, and you got to keep going in life, man. And I was actually listening to your podcast with Bo Young, and when he was saying that he's a glass half full type of guy, and that was, I kind of echo that mentality. And I actually wrote a book a couple of years ago with Sean Duffy just on that, just to share the experience, because it's, and it's amazing. The book's not even in print anymore, but I still get people reaching out going, hey, how did you deal with this situation? I've been diagnosed with this, or I've had to overcome that. And, just having that sort of positive outlook on life, and I think is a really, really important thing. And it's not always easy.
Okay.
But for me, it's something that it's like a daily kind of affirmation that I do with myself.
Okay. Yeah, it's super heavy, but I mean, you're doing great. And I think you're an inspiration to a lot of people too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, it had been a rough part. I don't even comprehend it, to be honest with you. So
yeah, it's amazing what you can do though when you're faced with something. It's kind of, you can either lay down and crumble in a ball, or get up and go, do you know what? I'm going to get through this. I'm going to try and make the most of this. I'm going to make the best of this shitty situation.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say 10 times out of 10, you're probably going to come through it for the better rather than for the worst.
That's heavy, but I mean, it's super cool. So, I think you are an inspiration to some people. I think if someone was going through the same situation today, what was like one thing you would say to them?
The one thing is to stay positive, and I know that sounds really, really simple to do, and I would also say don't squash the process of getting to that positive place either. You do have to go through those emotions where you go, this is shit. This is, I don't understand this. Why is this happening? But then you got to dive into it, and you kind of got to look to rationalize, what's good in your life and what you do have to live for and the good things. And you can look around you. There's always someone going through a worse situation than you. There's always someone doing it harder. And just being thankful for what you do have, for me, is the thing that keeps pulling me through.
Cool.
I'm still here. I've got 2 beautiful kids. I still have the ability to go for a surf. These are all like tick, tick, tick. These are all things that fill up the bucket, and it's just focusing on those things that you can do. And that turns into positivity for me.
Okay. And then one other thing, you were in the tsunami. Was it you guys at G-Land? How was that? I had Robbie Bain on. I think he talked about it too.
Yeah, Bainey was there.
Yeah.
That was a really radical moment. It's this was early. This is '94, so
yeah.
G-Land '94 is different to G-Land 2023.
Okay.
And I went back last year for the CT event, and I was blown away. There was roads and power lines, and I was going, what? This stuff wasn't here.
Yeah.
The last time I was here. But in '94, we were running off generators, and it was bamboo thatch huts on stilts, and it was still pretty wild and primitive. Raw jungle.
Yeah.
And we'd been on a surf trip for hot tuna. We'd been in Bali for a couple of days, and then we were scheduled to go out to G-Land. We went out, and then the night we got there, this earthquake happened off the Grudgingen Bay, and then we just got wiped out, man. At 2 a.m, this thing just came through, mowed through the camp, took out a lot of the huts, and we luckily, everyone in our camp was okay, all the surfers, but a lot of people weren't. A lot of people lost their lives. It was a real heavy moment,
Of course, yeah.
It was super heavy, and Bainey got beat up. Me and Dog Marsh probably got the worst beat up.
Really?
Yeah, because we were right down on the huts, right in front of Speedies, and those huts were on the sand. We went up in the main camp, which was a little on this little kind of ridge, a little bit higher. We just got driven straight back into the jungle, and
holy shit,
we had nothing left. Everything, clothes were ripped off our bodies. We were just going through the jungle, just getting absolutely hammered. So it took us a couple of days to get out of there, straight home, straight into hospital. Just on intravenous antibiotics for a couple of weeks. We were infected everywhere. It was nuts, and we were lucky, but
super lucky.
Again, we went, the day after we managed to get down and check out where our huts were, and there was nothing there. It was all gone. Like even the concrete footings were like these big boulder things were like, yards and yards into the jungle. The thing had just picked it up and tossed it in there, and there were trees that had been looked like a chainsaw. Wow. So yeah, we got lucky, but I think as surfers we also were able to handle the situation in terms of turbulent water and trying to go with it rather than fight it too much. And anyway, that was a radical experience for sure.
Do you remember getting hit? Or were you asleep?
I remember it vividly.
Crazy.
I woke up because I was in a hut by myself. Next to me was Simon Law and Richard Marsh. So there was only 3 huts down there, and the 2 owners of Cuda Lines clothing at the time. And Neil Purchase Jr. was supposed to be in my hut with me, and he pulled out the night before. He didn't go. He got a call from his girlfriend at the time, partner, and she's like, "Oh, I've got this really weird feeling, bad feeling. I think you should come home." And we're going, "What? What are you talking about?" He pulled out the night before.
Whoa!
I know, it was so radical, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel good about it. My chick's not feeling good about it. So can you guys, and like, we're going, okay, whatever. He's going, can you cover me? Like the boss is going to go, why did you leave? You're supposed to go. The boss of hot tuna. So anyway, he peeled out and he was supposed to be in the hut. So yeah, but it was 2 a.m. and the animals were going crazy. You could hear monkeys screaming, and it was just, they obviously knew what was going on. They'd felt the tremor, the earthquake.
Yeah.
And then a couple of minutes later, you could hear this rumbling and the ground literally started shaking. And then, within a minute or two, it was just getting louder and louder. And then bang, just pounded.
So crazy.
Yeah. As soon as I felt the water, I was like, wow, this isn't normal. And then clicked onto what was going on and then just went into survival mode.
Wow. Insane. Well, that's like, yeah, totally different than the other thing, than the cancer, but it's still super gnarly.
I know, it's crazy, right? And some people just get these big moments in life that they got to get through.
Okay. So most of the population of the world lives this generic kind of straight line life. They go to work and they come home. They surf or whatever, go play softball or whatever. But it seems like a lot of pro surfers, especially the guys that embrace life like you guys, have these crazy wild stories that amazes me, really.
Yeah, it's and whether that's a product of just traveling
yeah.
Seeing so much of the world and being in these remote locations and just being open to adventure too. Surfers are quite adventurous, I feel like. They'll look for that adventure, which is a little bit risky and unknown, and there's some danger around it, But, Indo in itself is a pretty volatile place in the world. There's a lot of energy around that place, man. And, it's right up there near the equator and it's hot and there's volcanoes everywhere and there's shit going on. So, but yeah, it does seem like that, I guess it's part of that rock star lifestyle.
Yeah. You guys live a full life. Like adventurous people live a full life.
Yeah, wherever you are, there's like the circus is happening and there's people everywhere. There's a lot of energy around it. The events are always like high impact and people are partying and, there's all this stuff going on around it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to be part of that. And you can see that energy. Even now, even these days, like when I go to events and I can see it all happening and I'm, a bit removed because I'm just calling some action. You can see it happening and you can see all those guys are involved in it. It's cool.
Was there anybody or is anybody today, even because you're around it still, that kind of pulls back, they surf their heats and they walk away and they go into their own zone?
We'll
say back in your day.
Yeah, like, it's the competition area in itself is a pretty fun place to observe.
Yes.
Just to watch what different people are doing. People watching, the preparation before heats, the post-heat breakdown, whether it's calm sitting there with a coach or whether it's smashing surfboards or, punching walls or whatever it may be. And there's all these different things that happen and the intensity of those moments change depending on, what's going on the tour and points and all this other stuff, and personalities. But, there are some crew, obviously, Jack Robbo's pretty zen. He's kind of Yoda-ish in the way he's going about things, where then you look at Italo and there's kind of fire and energy around what he does. And it's not unusual to hear some stuff going on in the locker room. Andy in his day, I remember there was this one heat at Lowers. It was the year after I won and I had Andy in I think it was the 17th round or something, and I beat him. And he was, oh my God, he went into the surfers area and just tore the place apart, and no one was game to go near the place. And, I wanted to go in and get changed or whatever. And I was like, this guy at least 20 minutes just to come down. I don't want to even get near the guy. So, that sort of stuff doesn't happen as much, I don't think, just because there's so many cameras and, someone with a phone and everything's documented. And, a lot of guys travel with coaches now too. We were our fellow competitors and our buddies that we travel with, they were our coaches. We used to help each other. These days there is a coach there and there's someone who can break it down for you and do the post-heat analyzing and all that stuff. So it's a lot more tame these days. It's a lot more professional. Some guys choose to stay away from the whole competitors area. Felipe, for one, at J-Bay, because everyone's kind of staying in the vicinity of the point and running the house pretty much on the point there. Felipe would go down for his heat, drop his jersey off, do his post-heat interview, and he'd disappear again. You'd never see him. He wasn't even keeping his boards in the locker room. It was like he had his own little thing going on. It worked well for him, that event, obviously.
Yeah, cool. Surfing today with the coaches and the cameras and all this around, how did we get back to the 80s and 90s where there's a little more personality, maybe? If you want to skip this question, you can.
Yeah, it's a weird one to answer because I feel like all the surfers on tour, the men and women, they all have their own story and their own personality.
Of course.
They are individuals.
Of course.
But I'm wondering whether there's a certain filter put on everything just because of where pro surfing is at the moment, and where sponsorships are and representing companies. And, there's this expectation around what the perception of a pro surfer is supposed to be like today.
Do you think pro surfing is now really pro, as before it was so new?
I feel like it is.
Yeah.
I feel like it is for sure. And I've seen it go through that transition as well. I totally saw it go through that transition from the days with Matt Hoy and all those guys and Kerr and Shmoo and the party days, through to Kelly's era and the whole momentum generation. And we all kind of went, okay, we're supposed to train and be professional and do all the right things. And, let's still party a little bit at least and have some fun. But now it seems pretty straight down the line. Don't get me wrong. Everyone celebrates and everyone has a good time, but it's timed. It's timed to perfection now,
Yeah. Okay.
So the personalities are still there. I don't know, the rivalries though. I'd love to see them kind of
the gloves on, maybe.
I'd like to see the rivalries vocalized a little bit.
Me too.
Like even last year when we saw Kanoa and Griffin going at it, one of the great. It was like, I want to beat that guy. I want my spot in the final five. And they were pretty vocal about that, so that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the days too, like there was always a bad guy on tour. There was Sonny Garcia, or there was certain guys were not necessarily a bad guy. I guess that's the wrong quote, but someone that was just outspoken, like Andy Irons or something. Just someone.
Yeah, the real alphas, right?
Yeah.
Top of the pack, And Sonny was definitely that. He was super intimidating, but Big Teddy bear.
And it worked.
It worked. I remember, and you know what? Sonny was the worst paddler ever. And, I remember I was paddling past him and he's like growling at me and I'm like, shit. I had to put the brakes on a little bit here. Otherwise life's going to be tough for me when I go home.
That's funny.
There are those guys that are intimidating. And I guess there's no one on tour like that. I get Medina's probably the closest thing.
I can see that.
Just because of how gnarly he is and just how focused he is and cyborg-like when it's time to compete. And he's one of those guys that will do anything.
Good. I like to hear that.
Yeah.
You have some boards. Those boards look sick, right?
I think you.
Yeah, I really want to get one of those. I think it's that cruiser one looks kind of like fun, good for like around here in Southern California.
Is that
what's called, a cruiser?
Yeah, it's the cruiser.
Yeah.
So my brand's called Volume.
Yep.
Volume Shakes. I started that a couple of years ago. So when I got off tour, I worked for Aloha Surfboards for a while.
Uh-huh.
I've been working for Surf Hardware International, which is FCS, the parent company for FCS. I've been working with guys. And I'm still working with them today. So my job with those guys is across product marketing and brand ambassador, sports marketing. So I do all the contracts with all the guys, basically an advisory to the product and marketing departments as well. So that position pays the mortgage for me.
Perfect.
And then I do the commentary as a complement to that. And then for several years, I was, straight out, as soon as I got off the tour, I started designing surfboards. I learned how to do it, learned the programs, I learned how to shape, and I worked for Aloha for a number of years. And then I went and worked for Global Surf Industry doing file design for a lot of their boards. And then I kind of went, okay, it's time to do my own thing. So I had a passion for equipment and building boards. So I started Volume, and the brand is definitely not a high performance shortboard brand. If it's actually the opposite. It's it's, for me, I make boards for what I need at the moment, and that's bigger, higher volume boards, just because of the restrictions I have with my hip and
of course, yeah,
and whatever. I try and make boards that are easy to ride for you and me and crew that are
looks so good.
Dude, I see guys, 50-year-old, and they're trying to just do a full like blowtail thing out the back on a 6.0 shorty, which is fantastic. But I go, dude, if that's the only thing in your quiver, then you need to add something, because there's a time and place for that board. There's also a time and place for a cruiser or a fish or a twin fin or something that's just going to give you the most amount of enjoyment regardless of what the waves are doing. Like, there is not a day that I go and check the surf that I don't surf, because I always know that there's always something in my car, whether it's a mid-length or a 20 or whatever it may be, that I know that I'm going to have fun on. If it's 1 foot, if it's head high, or if it's double overhead, I know there's something that I can have a good time on. So my philosophy has been really open to exploring boards. And I guess the best way to put it for me is, like, on my competitive days, when I was surfing at the height of my powers, I was trying to ride the least amount of volume possible.
Of course.
Now I try and ride the most amount of volume possible.
Right.
While still being able to
do some turns.
Have that sensitivity and control.
Yeah. I mean, your boards look sick. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, so are they available in America?
At the moment, no. But I'm looking to make that happen.
Okay.
I got a couple of buddies I'm talking to maybe set some stuff up over there.
Okay.
I definitely want to get it into the US for sure, because I feel like that style of board would be pretty well received, and I'm getting more and more inquiries from America as well. Like, hey man, I want to get this. Where can I get it? I'm like,
where do you get them in Australia? I got a decent sized audience in Australia.
Look, I do a lot of I do all the custom stuff myself.
Okay.
And I shape out of Brett Warner's factory. I use his facility down there. He does all my glassing and everything for me.
Okay.
So I do all of the custom work, and then I have boards down at some of the local shops where I do production runs for them. And then I've also got boards in some of the other bigger chains. There's a chain of surf stores called Sideways in Australia.
Okay.
So some of that production's made up in Indonesia. So I've kind of got boards everywhere in Australia.
Okay, cool.
Depending on whether you want stock or a custom, then we can help you out. But I love that process of, talking to you and going, okay, what is it that you need? And then we'll wrap for half an hour. Then I'll go and make the board and
so
just
rad.
Yeah, I like that process of the one-on-one and trying to nail it so that.
My question to you is, so you have a 50-year-old guy that surfs okay or good or, above average or average. Let's just say average, right? That can surf, but he's struggling because he's still thinking that he's 20.
Yep.
Your board fixes that problem.
Yep. It does. It absolutely does. And there's a couple of options too. If you're not ready to go to that mid-length cruiser, which is, a bit longer and wider up the nose and basically has a different bottom contour on it. It's more kind of V into spiral, V concave, double concave out the tail, which I feel like is a really good bottom.
Yeah.
For that longer, wider board, it does help keep that sensitivity there. But if you still want something that's relatively the same height as you, like a typical shortboard, the Hybrid Plus, which is a little wider up the nose, but has that performance tail on it, but just gives you the ability to get in a bit early, stability to get up. And I was actually chatting to a buddy of mine yesterday, and he's going, dude, I went over the handlebars where I was jumping up the other day, and I was going, man, as we get older, it's the hardest thing to do is that pop up and having, because it's like doing a push up, right? You got to keep that motion of doing a burpee or a push up. As you get older, it gets harder unless you maintain that. So if you can have that platform under you that makes that a bit easier, but then also has that speed as you're dropping in is an important part of it. So Shorty Plus, Hybrid Plus, any of those models are really right in the ballpark for that.
Do you have a favorite surfer of all time? Is there someone you looked up to or saw in the magazine or a movie or something, or the guy even today?
Yeah, sure. Tom Curran was one for me that I always just couldn't get enough of watching that guy surf. You know, the mystique around his whole personality and persona and what he does is, it's intriguing. But for me, just the style, positioning, and everything. And I even to the point where I used to try and surf like the guy, and there was millions of kids that did. So whole generation. And then, initially Tom, and then, Occy was another one, obviously, because he was kind of the Aussie guy that we all looked up to. And then it's weird, like you're on tour with guys who are your favorite surfers. Like, how could you not, admire what Kelly and Andy and those guys are doing? But style for me is a huge thing. I've always been a massive advocate of watching good style. So, Curran was at the top of the list.
You're in a heat with, let's say, you've always looked up to the guy or whatever. Are you rolling over for him, or are you trying harder to beat him?
The first heat I had with Occy was when he was coming out of his
retirement kind of thing,
fried chicken phase, let's call it.
Yeah, there you go.
And it was when he started to compete on the Aussie circuit with us.
Yeah.
Rocking up to heats, and I remember the first heat, and I was going, shit, man, I got Occy. This is gnarly. And I was like doing my full routine and getting ready.
Yeah.
It was a comp up the Gold Coast, and Occy paddles out with a cigarette in his mouth. And
he's
paddling out, trying not to get the ciggy wet.
That's so rad.
I'm looking at this guy, my hero, paddling out with a dart in his mouth, and I'm just going, this is not real. So anyway, I won that heat. That was a rad experience. But then, thinking back and then competing against him once he got fit and got back on the tour, and, he smoked me a couple of times, in all those good events for him, Chopu and Fiji and stuff like that. So, definitely not rolling over. No way in the world.
Good.
Just, you got to beat those guys.
And going back to Occy too, remember, I don't know, maybe like 8-10 years ago, he almost requalified again. Remember when they were doing the QS? I think it was like Margaret River, like he missed it by like a heat or something.
Yeah.
Out of the blue. Like he was commentating, and then all of a sudden he was almost on the CT again.
I know, it's rad, huh? The greats,
so crazy.
They got that foundation in their surfing that never grows old.
Okay, and then another question I have, and I don't ask this one very often, but I think you're the right guy. A lot of sports have pensions. Do you think there'll ever be a time you guys, I don't know if they pay into it, or I don't even know how really a pension would work, but so there is retirement for some of the former pro surfers.
I don't know. Again, I don't know like you how that would work, but I think it would be a really good thing because, there's a lot of guys that come off the tour who are completely set up. They really don't have to worry about money. They don't have to work again.
Only a handful of them, though, right?
There's a high percentage of surfers. Like myself, I got off the tour and I wasn't one of those guys that was getting paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands a year. I was maybe getting a couple of hundred in a good year, and I was trying to be smart with my money and invest it and buy houses and whatever else. So I think a lot of guys struggle when they get off the tour to find what it is that they can do, and they go from this life where everyone's wanting to be around them and, they're famous and they're asking for autographs. And it's a selfish existence where, you're the man, So you get off tour, the phone stops ringing, people start, stop asking for your autograph. And it's kind of like, what do I do now? And there's this default surf school mentality where a lot of guys just go, shit, all I know how to do is surf. So I'm going to try and teach people to surf. But a lot of guys just go off the rails because they don't know what to do. Like it's the tour is, and sorry to be giving you a long answer here.
No, it's okay.
The tour is this lifestyle and this little nucleus that is not real in terms of day to day. It's not like getting up and feeding the kids and going to work and doing your job and coming home and you go on the weekend, catch up with your buddies, go for a surf, whatever. yeah, it's this magical world of privilege, and it's amazing. Don't get me wrong, it's incredible, and I love that it's there. But it's with any sport, it's not really reality. So when you come back to reality and you try and get back into reality, it's a hard transition. So coming back to your question, I think if there was something set up where there was not only financial support, but also counseling and sort of support for mental issues and stuff, like that people could lean into and go, I actually don't know what to do here, man. Like, I'm struggling with this whole thing. I've had heaps of crew, that have come and gone, dude, how did you do it? How did you figure it out? And for me, it was easy because I had something bigger to focus on. I had something that I kind of had to deal with, and that helped transition. And I had a lot of opportunity presented to me, I guess, as well, that a lot of, work office and things like that. But some guys don't get that, and they're like, oh, I miss it so much. And they feel like that's their sense of belonging, and that gives them purpose, and that props them up and, gives them their daily fix of confidence in life, being a pro surfer. And when it all goes, it's like, oh, I can come tumbling down pretty quick. So it'd be great to see some support there.
Yeah, I would love to see. I think there's a handful, especially I think in this generation coming up, there's going to be a lot of kids that are superstars until they're not, or they're a 15-year-old superstar, and when they're 20, they're just like me, I guess. I don't know, but it's going to be shocking for them, and there's going to need to be some support.
Yeah,
financially and mentally, like you said.
The 12, 13, 14-year-olds today, do they even know who Tom Curran is? Do they even?
I don't know. I think if their dad surfs or their mom surfs, they might. But I think if they're fresh first-generation surfers, they probably have zero clue. Yeah.
So it's like, it's at some point you kind of, it's nice to be remembered, but for the most part, you're forgotten. Unless you're one of those, MR figures, 4-time world champ, or, obviously Kelly, or any of those superstars, But yeah, it's an interesting thing to talk about for sure.
Richie, thank you so much for coming on the Quivercast. I'm super stoked. I feel like we didn't get it all, but we got a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to come on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure. And like you, I feel like we kind of just scratched the surface. So
yeah,
it was great to chat with you. And anytime you want to jump on again, mate,
Let's do it. All right, everyone. Mike and Richie, we're out of here.
100 foot out, Joe 100 racks on a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo. 100 foot out, Joe 100 racks on a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo. You know we don't fuck with no kooks. Your boo on my didgeridoo. They calling me Duke, I'm stacking the loot. I'm ripping your chick in the coop. She grabbing a hold of my leggy. They jelly, they Gucci my weddy. The friends of Giuseppe, the chain is so heavy, she think that I'm charging the Eddie. 100 foot out, Chopu. 100 racks on a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo. 100 foot out, Chopu. 100 racks on a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo. Surf trap, I'm stacking that money. Your shorts a red Ferrari. They start to calling me Dundee. Diamonds are surfing McFlurry. She want me to teach her to surf. Splash. I'm pulling up, ripping the verse. I'm leaving these kooks in the hearse. They get moved 100 foot on their head, they get work. 100 foot out, Chopu. 100 racks on a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo. 100 foot out, Chopu. 100 racks on a surf, dude. Slippery, big guns like Mark Fu. Trap jumping like a kangaroo. You know we don't fuck with no kooks. You know we don't fuck with no kooks. You calling me Duke, I'm stacking the loot. I'm ripping your chick in the coop. You know we don't fuck with no kooks. You know we don't fuck with no kooks. They calling me Duke, I'm stacking the loot. I'm ripping your chick in the coop.
Hey, you guys, Endless Summer box set. This thing is legit. It's authentic, numbered certificate in it. It has a 5-frame film strip from the original print. You will literally own a piece of history. It has a specially minted bronze medallion. Dude, that thing's sick. Okay, there's so much more here. Go to the show notes. There's a link on there. Go check this piece of history out. This thing's rad. Seriously. Smithsonian American History Museum has it. It took 4 years of research with 3.5 in production, all hand assembled. This thing's rad. So much to this awesome box set. Remastered DVD, sharper images than the original film, but dude, this thing's so sick. Link in the show notes.